Okay. We'll get started now. So thank you for joining us and welcome to the Peconic Estuary Partnerships presentation this morning for Estuary Day. We host Estuary Day with Long Island Sound Study and South Shore Estuary Reserve for the last couple of years as a day during National Estuaries Week to bring awareness to the work that we do as the estuary programs here on Long Island. And not only just to bring awareness to what we do, but also to inspire our communities to get involved with the work that we do and to help us achieve our missions, which is to protect and restore natural resources and our estuary ecosystems here on the island. So our presentation this morning is Climate Change, Water Quality, Habitats, and Wildlife, Get Involved with the Peconic Estuary Partnership. So we'll be going into some of the projects that we do in these areas, and towards the end of the presentation, we're also going to show you how you can get involved with us and what you can do in your daily lives as a steward for the Peconics. So our presentation will end around 11 a.m. Long Island Sound Studies presentation is going to begin at 12, and South Shore Estuary Reserve's presentation will be at 2, and there's different registration links for their presentations. With that, I do want to just go over some of the Zoom controls and how I'll be fielding questions. You'll notice that you're on mute when you came into the meeting. We're just trying to minimize distractions, but we do encourage you to interact with us and ask questions. So please use that chat box, which is part of the toolbar in your Zoom platform. You can just click that chat box and the chat will open and you can ask any question or make any comment you have during any portion of this meeting. One of the PEP staff members will be able to answer your question, but also keep in mind towards the end of the meeting when our presentation concludes, we are going to be hosting a Q&A portion just designated for PEP staff to completely answer all the questions that you might have at the end of the presentation. So heavily utilize that chat box now and at the end as well. And just also to let you know, we are recording this. So if you have to leave or if someone you know wanted to join and they couldn't, we will have this available for later viewing through PEP's website, our social media channels, and especially our PEP Vimeo platform. So now I'm just going to talk about who PEP is and why we're here today. So the Peconic Estuary Partnership is one of 28 national estuary programs around the country that's federally funded by the EPA through the Clean Water Act. And the reason why our program was formed is because the Peconic Estuary is this network of bays here between the North and South Forks, and it's recognized as an estuary of national significance. So because of that, the Peconic Estuary Partnership was formed with the mission to protect and restore this important ecosystem on the East End. And we now have the word partnership in our name. It used to be program. The partnership is because it's a very collaborative effort to really achieve our mission. We need all of our partners on board and to work together to improve water quality, to protect habitats and wildlife, to make our communities resilient in the face of climate change. And then, of course, we always work to build and maintain strong partnerships and engage with the community through education and outreach. And this is one of those ways that we do that through virtual presentations like this or on the ground events as well. And when we're doing these things, we're not just focused on the water, but we're also focused on the land. And that's what this watershed piece here is in our mission, which is that land area within this yellow line that is where the water drains from this land and it goes into the direction of our estuary. And you're going to see in a lot of the projects that we talk about, a lot of it is intertwined with the land and the water. We have to focus on what we do on land because we highly impact the health of our estuary. We could be miles away from it, but eventually stormwater runoff and groundwater does make its way to the bays. And so we're now going to dive right into the projects that we do for habitats and wildlife. And I'm going to introduce Elizabeth Hornstein, who is the state coordinator for the Peconic Estuary Partnership. She's going to talk about the projects we do to achieve a healthy ecosystem with abundant, diverse wildlife. So Elizabeth, I'll hand it off to you now.
Thank you, Lauren, and good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So the Peconic Estuary has a rich diversity of habitats, from open water estuary habitats to submerged aquatic vegetation and shellfish beds to wetlands and beaches, a number of freshwater habitats, and also upland forest and grassland habitats. Unfortunately, though, over time, development and a number of human activities have resulted in habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation. So since its inception, the Peconic Estuary Partnership has been working to restore critical habitat areas around the watershed for the benefit of both wildlife and people. And to date, we have completed 29 projects around the estuary, which are shown in the map here. And we also have many, many more projects that are currently in progress. And the PEP has a habitat restoration plan that really is the guide for our habitat restoration efforts and has a list of priority projects that we'd like to work with our partners to restore and protect. And you can find our habitat restoration plan as well as a map of our habitat restoration projects on our website. The link is shown there, and also a link will be provided in a resources document later. So I encourage you to check that out. But the latest version of the PEP Habitat Restoration Plan, which will be published very shortly, identifies focusing on 3 priority habitat restoration types: eelgrass, wetlands, and freshwater diatomous fish habitat. Because, as I'll get to in a second, all of these habitat types are under great threat, and these are also very important nursery and breeding habitats for a variety of estuary species. Next, Lauren. Thank you. So first off, eelgrass. Our eelgrass habitat has declined by 80% since 1930. The 1930 eelgrass habitat is shown in the map there by that pink-purple color, and then our current eelgrass habitat is shown by the green color. Today, we have less than 1,000 acres of eelgrass habitat remaining, and as you can see, most of our current eelgrass habitat is around Shelter Island and to the east. We only have one eelgrass meadow in Bullhead Bay in the western part of the estuary. And eelgrass provides important shelter and food for a number of juvenile fish and shellfish, most notably the juvenile bay scallops, which actually attach to the eelgrass blades. So the decline of eelgrass is very concerning for the health of our estuary wildlife. And unfortunately, eelgrass are threatened by a variety of factors, from water quality to rising ocean temperatures, rising sea levels, hardening of the shoreline, and boating and fishing activities, which really makes protecting and restoring our eelgrass habitat fairly challenging. A number of eelgrass restoration projects have been attempted over the years, but these have had mixed success. Currently, PEP funds a long-term eelgrass monitoring program that provides valuable information on the health of the remaining eelgrass habitat in the estuary, which helps us to protect the habitat that we have left. We also recently funded and completed an eelgrass biooptical and habitat suitability model to help us understand what has led to the decline of eelgrass habitat in the estuary and where are the areas that we should really focus on in moving forward for eelgrass restoration and enhancement purposes. And we're currently working on creating a GIS web map tool based on the results of this project that can then be used by managers to help inform eelgrass management going forward. And we actually have a nice video on this project in our media library, which I encourage you to check out. Next slide, Lauren. Wetlands, which are vegetated areas around the edge of the estuary that get inundated by the tides twice a day, are another really important habitat type. These are actually some of the most productive habitats that we have on Earth. In fact, 3/4 of all fish and shellfish that we eat relies on wetlands or marsh habitat at some point during its life. And these are also important habitats for a number of shorebirds, as well as the Diamondback terrapin, which is an exclusively estuarine reptile that's found in our estuary. Marshes also provide a critical buffer between estuarine waters and the terrestrial environment, helping to filter stormwater runoff from land and conversely helping to protect against storms and flooding. So PEP has been working to restore our marsh habitats around the estuary, which have been degraded from development, and as our next speaker is going to talk about, are also being increasingly threatened by rising sea levels. And I just want to highlight a couple of the projects that we're working on. We're currently working with a number of partners on a marsh restoration project out in Orient, New York. This marsh is currently choked with the invasive plant Phragmites, and we are working to restore the natural tidal flow to this marsh to help promote the reestablishment of native vegetation, which will hopefully improve the habitat value and increase habitat for a number of important bird species. We're also working with Suffolk County Parks on a wetland restoration project at Indian Island County Park, where one of the main things of this restoration project is to help increase resiliency of this marsh to rising sea levels and allow for marsh migration. And Peconic Estuary Partnership has actually been conducting wetland monitoring at this marsh for a number of years to help monitor the health of this marsh habitat and help determine if this marsh is keeping pace with rising seas. And then another thing that we are working on is promoting living shorelines over hardened shorelines. Hardened shoreline structures like seawalls and bulkheads, while they can provide protection for homeowners against storms, they disrupt our natural shoreline processes, and they also prevent the shorelines from being able to naturally migrate inland. Living shorelines, on the other hand, which use plants, shellfish, rocks, and other natural features to provide protection from storms and help combat erosion, also provide much greater habitat value. And I have a picture shown on the bottom right there of a recently planted marsh habitat that's part of our Living Shoreline project that we recently completed at Widow's Hole Preserve in Greenport. So if you're ever out that way, maybe check it out. Next slide. And our final habitat, priority habitat that we are working to restore is freshwater diadromous fish habitat. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, dams were built on nearly all of Long Island's rivers and tributaries for a number of industrial uses, and these dams cut off historic migratory routes for diadromous fish, which are fish that migrate between freshwaters and ocean waters. And this had a particular impact on the alewife, or the river herring, which migrates from the ocean to our freshwater rivers and streams every spring to spawn. The dams basically are blocking the fish from being able to access their freshwater spawning grounds, and this has resulted in the decline of alewife populations. Today, the Peconic Estuary watershed happens to contain the two largest alewife spawning runs on Long Island. The largest run is at Alewife Creek, which happens to be the only alewife run on Long Island without any major barriers for alewife migration. But we are still currently working with the town of Southampton and other partners to further improve this habitat for the alewife and also to monitor this alewife population. The second largest alewife spawning run occurs in the Peconic River, and unlike Alewife Creek, this habitat, this river has several barriers to alewife migration. And Lauren, if you can click next. Thank you. So the Peconic River previously had 6 dams along its length, but PEP and our partners have slowly been working to install fish passes at these dams that allow the fish to go over or around the dam, thereby restoring access to their spawning habitat. In 2010, a nature-like fishway or rock ramp was installed at the Grangeable Park Dam, the first barrier on the Peconic River, and a picture of that fishway is shown in that middle picture there. And this restored about 35 acres of habitat in the lower reaches of the Peconic River system for alewife. Then in 2016, another fish ladder, an Alaskan skeet path, as well as an American eel path, was installed at the Edwards Avenue Dam, further upstream on the Peconic River. And you can see on the map those fish passage projects that have been completed are shown with the green triangles, and then our remaining barriers are the red circles. We are currently working on fish passage projects at all of the remaining barriers on the Peconic River system, with the exception of the most upstream dam. And when all of those fish passage projects get completed, we will have restored 300 acres of diatomous fish habitat in this river system. And hopefully this will help to greatly increase the alewife population in this river. And later, Lauren is going to talk to you about how you can get involved in our alewife monitoring and restoration efforts. And with that, I am now going to introduce our next speaker to you, Joyce Novak, the Director of Peconic Estuary Partnership. She is going to talk to you about the projects that we are working on to make more resilient communities prepared for climate change.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So good morning, everybody, and happy National Estuaries Week. As the Peconic National Estuary Program gets ready to launch our new comprehensive conservation management plan over the next few months, one of our key goals will be helping our communities to prepare for climate change. In the Peconic Estuary and its watershed, we are already experiencing some of the effects of climate change, as most of you are probably aware. 3 of the largest climate change associated stressors are sea level rise, increased precipitation, and higher mean temperatures, both in the atmosphere and in the water. On Long Island, the 35-year trend of summer water temperatures taken from NOAA data on Long Island is an increase of around 3 degrees Celsius, or approximately 6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is fairly significant. This has begun to result in real-world consequences, such as habitat loss, species change, property damage, and water quality impairments in ground and surface waters. Next slide, please. If we look a little closer at these consequences, what changes can we expect? In sea level rise, we can see an increase in tidal elevation, resulting in habitat loss and erosion. And we can see impacts to septic and sewers. This picture here shows an inundated septic system on or near the water. Changes in mean temperatures can also result in species changes and species loss, increased and varied harmful algal blooms, increased storm frequency and intensity. Additionally, increased precipitation will cause increased runoff, an input into our systems and erosion. Next slide, please. Here are two further examples. The left is erosional effects in Montauk. That picture is taken. And on the right, we have a drowned tidal wetland on the North Fork. So we are seeing these changes and these climate change impacts currently. Next slide, please. In 2019, PEP updated its critical lands protection strategy to develop a climate-based critical land protection strategy. Next slide, please. This tool looked at all land uses and determines priority areas for preservation based on coastal landscape projected changes due to climate change. Some of the considerations include parcels, all developed and undeveloped, predicted to return to underwater or wetland habitats, inland properties, developed and undeveloped, that could transition to shoreline positions under climate change scenarios. 3, existing living shoreline and opportunities for new living shorelines under climate change scenarios. Parcels where development might result in increased pressure to disrupt natural processes, including erosion, and areas which are appropriate for inland wetland migration. Next slide, please. One of the focus areas that is a priority for the Peconic Estuary Partnership, as Elizabeth discussed, is our wetland and our marsh areas. And inland adjacent areas that have the potential to serve as marsh migration areas as sea levels rise. Marshes are important habitats for wildlife, natural resiliency, and clean water. During the Long Island Tidal Wetland Trends Analysis, published in 2015, but using 2005 data in the Peconics, DEC found a 10.5% loss of marsh in the Peconic system. DEC is currently in the process of updating this information in our area and to further survey and put numbers to exact marsh loss numbers. But as you can see, marsh loss is also a priority for the program. And so looking at the interplay between climate change scenarios and these marsh areas and being able to give them places for survival is key. Next slide, please. Part of our critical lands protection strategy identified priority parcels that will allow for tidal wetland advancement in the face of sea level rise. Here you can see the green areas in the Peconics as our highest priority and red areas are lowest, meaning they have the potential for less than 0.1 acres of marsh advancement. This is one of the product maps that came out of our work for the Critical Lands Protection Strategy update in 2019. Next slide, please. Here's a zoomed in area of one of our subcatchments at Downs Creek. And this gives an example of where marsh migration will likely take place in this particular area, based on TNC's work using a SLAM model. The green areas represent a 70 to 100% likelihood of where current tidal marsh will be in 2100. Next slide, please. PEP works with our partners to achieve regional responses to climate change. The New York State Ocean Acidification Task Force we participate in. We are members on the Suffolk County Coastal Erosion and Sea Level Rise Task Force. We work with the East End towns in rolling out and sharing all of the information we've developed through the Critical Lands Protection Strategy, because together we can do this. And this is truly a partnership-based endeavor. There is no one town or area that is facing climate changes alone. We are members of the Association of National Estuary Programs, and so work on a national level to join together for various tools and resources. We are involved in living shoreline projects. Elizabeth talked about one that we're involved in Greenport, Whittles Hole, which I do encourage you to go out and look at. Not only does it build good habitat, but it relies on natural mechanisms of shoreline resiliency. And we have been facilitating the National Atmospheric Deposition Program with Suffolk County for over 17 years to enable us to look at long-term trend data, often where the implications of increased precipitation can be seen most notably. Not listed here also are our climate smart communities around the East End. Several communities have achieved climate smart community status, and some are still in the process of getting there. This is a New York State program that gives a stepwise process for towns and civic associations to begin to look at how their communities can become smart in the face of climate change. And that's it. Next slide, please. At this time, I would like to introduce you to Sarah Schaefer, our program coordinator here at the Peconic Estuary Partnership, who's going to talk about water quality.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Joyce, for the introduction. My name is Sarah Schaefer. I'm the program coordinator for the Peconic Estuary Partnership. And one of the Peconic Estuary Partnership's goals is to achieve clean water, and that is for the purpose of ecosystem health and safe recreation. And the following slides, I'm going to present a summary of some projects to achieve this goal. And in our watershed, poor water quality and across Long Island is linked to people's actions on land. And in the Peconic Estuary, pollution tends to come from non-point sources like septic systems, residential and agricultural fertilizer, and stormwater runoff, rather than point sources from a pipe like from a sewage treatment plant or from a stormwater runoff pipe that would directly flow into our estuary. So a lot of these non-point sources flow into groundwater and into surface waters, and then directly impact the health of our water quality in the Peconic Estuary. And one of the most serious issues affecting water quality in the Peconic Estuary is excess nitrogen loading, which is caused mostly by wastewater loads and also fertilizer that will be that runs off people's properties into our groundwater and surface water. And this can cause negative impacts like harmful algae blooms, low dissolved oxygen, and degraded aquatic habitats. So reducing nitrogen loading in the Peconic Estuary, especially to groundwater, has been identified as one of Peconic Estuary Partnership's top priorities. And we're committed to working with the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, otherwise known as LINAP. And LINAP is a multi-year initiative established in 2015 by the New York State DEC, the Long Island Regional Planning Council, and the LINAP initiative works very closely with Nassau and Suffolk communities, Suffolk County communities and stakeholders, as well as the 3 national estuary programs in our watershed. And the main goals of this LINAP initiative are to assess nitrogen loading and pollution to Long Island's waters, to identify sources of nitrogen to surface waters and groundwater, and to establish nitrogen reduction endpoints or goals that we want to meet to reduce the negative impacts of nitrogen in our groundwater and surface waters, and also to develop an implementation plan to achieve these goals. And so there are many facets of what the Peconic Estuary Partnership does, along with our partners that fall under this LINAP plan. Next slide, Lauren. And so one of the things that the Peconic Estuary Partnership works on is our partnership with the Suffolk County Reclaim Our Water initiative. And this initiative is highly focused on reducing the nitrogen loading from septic systems and cesspools that are currently used within our watershed. So a lot of the homes in Suffolk County and the Peconic Estuary use septic systems and cesspools to treat our waste. About 75% of Suffolk County still uses septic systems and cesspools to treat our waste. with only about 25% that are hooked up to a sewage treatment plant. And the impact of that is that cesspools and septic systems don't really effectively treat our wastewater. They more or less are just a place for our wastewater from our homes to just filter down into the ground and into our groundwater. And then that waste can impact our surface water quality and our groundwater quality. And it's especially important to protect our groundwater because we all use the aquifer as a sole source drinking water source. And also this groundwater moves directly into our surface waters, and high levels of nitrogen can have negative impacts on water quality and habitat for aquatic life. So the goal of the Suffolk County Reclaim Our Water initiative is to provide financial incentives and information to homeowners within Suffolk County to upgrade their cesspools and septic systems to innovative alternatives on-site wastewater treatment systems. And these systems more effectively treat the nitrogen from our wastewater before it enters our groundwater and our surface waters to protect groundwater and surface water quality. The county has provided a grant and loan program. And in addition to that, the towns of East Hampton, Southampton, and Shelter Island are all providing additional funds through their Community Preservation Fund to support this initiative for residences within those towns and within the county. And below you can see a cesspool that was at a home in Mattituck that was then upgraded to the image on the right to an innovative alternative on-site treatment system. Next slide, Lauren. And this is a map that was provided by the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. It was updated as of August of this year. As you can see, there are many installations that were installed in the county using these county funds and also town funds to install these systems on homeowners' properties. So there was about 201 installations to date in the Peconic Estuary watershed and 522 within the county in total. And so about 39% of all the installations in the county were completed in the Peconic Estuary watershed, which is really fantastic and shows the amount of support that people in this area have for clean water and improving their own contribution to the groundwater and surface water health in the Peconic Estuary. And it's estimated that about 4,500 pounds of nitrogen will be reduced because of all of these installations in our watershed, which is fantastic. Next slide, Lauren. So in addition to nitrogen pollution projects, we also work on stormwater and fertilizer reduction projects. On your left, you can see a recent project we completed with the village of Sag Harbor, where they installed 2 rain gardens at the Havens Beach public beach. And these 2 rain gardens have native plants, and they are installed as of June this year. And the benefit of these rain gardens are that they take a large amount of storm water that was flowing across the parking lot, the road, and down over the beach at Havens Beach and directly into the beach at Havens Beach. And this storm water carried a lot of pollutants like nitrogen and pathogen pollution, fertilizer pollution, any road runoff from vehicles. And now all of that water can be filtered into these rain gardens. And these rain gardens prevent that stormwater runoff from entering the surface waters. And in addition to the benefit of the stormwater reduction, these rain gardens all have native plants. So the native plants are a more sustainable option. So they don't need fertilizer, they don't really need to be watered very frequently, and they're adapted to flourish in the Peconic Estuary. And they also are great tools to facilitate a really healthy ecosystem for butterflies and bees, pollinators and birds. So just really having a more sustainable impact on the local environment. And in connection to that, we as a Peconic Estuary Partnership Program do provide the Homeowner Rewards Program, which is a program that was started a few years ago. We provide financial support to homeowners who live within our Peconic Estuary watershed, up to $500 to install native plants, rain gardens, or rain barrels on their property. To date, we've completed 74 projects with some great homeowners, and I have a few pictures of those projects on this slide. And they have done amazing projects on their properties, creating beautiful gardens, and also, you know, teaching their children, teaching their neighbors, teaching their communities about the benefits of native plants, rain gardens, and rain barrels to attract native pollinators, reduce fertilizer use, and also the ability to reuse rainwater instead of using water from the groundwater to water their gardens if they're installing a rain barrel. Next slide, Lauren. And then some other components of our water quality projects are targeted to pathogen pollution. So as I said before, that stormwater pollution is one of the main focuses of our program. And one of the pollutants that stormwater can carry is pathogen pollution. And so we work a lot with our local towns to make sure that stormwater pollution is reduced and managed properly. In 2015, the Peconic Estuary Partnership started a intermunicipal agreement amongst the East End towns of Brookhaven, Riverhead, Southold, Shelter Island, Southampton, and East Hampton, and the villages of Greenport, North Haven, and Sag Harbor. And the county and the New York State Department of Transportation are also involved. All these groups work together to collaborate on making sure stormwater is managed properly, and also work together to create stormwater reduction projects and programs and share information, and also work together to educate the public on the importance of reducing stormwater pollution. As a partnership, we also worked in the past with East End towns and villages to create 12 plans, which highlight areas where stormwater pollution projects can and should be incorporated into the local environment. So we do have a link on our website to all of those plans. And we encourage towns to implement the pieces of those plans, and also learn from some of the techniques and technologies that were described in those stormwater management plans. And another component of our water quality projects focus on toxic and plastic pollution. So a lot of our work focuses on coastal cleanups. We have been holding various cleanup events every year, and most recently there was the International Coastal Cleanup Day, which was held last Saturday. And I know that this is a worldwide event, and a lot of people participate, and it's really great to see the amount of trash that people collect. And it's really just a great educational tool for communities to learn about the impacts of plastic pollution, and also clean up the local environment. And then we also promote the Stop Throwing Out Pollutant Days, which are designated days in each of the towns on the East End where homeowners can bring hazardous materials from their homes, like cleaning products, solvents, paints, to their local recycling center and dispose of them properly instead of just putting them down the drain or throwing them out in the garbage, which may not be the correct way to dispose of those products. And then lastly, we have initiated a monofilament recycling program. So in 2016, we installed 17 monofilament fishing line recycling receptacles across the estuary, and there's a map of those locations on our website and linked in this presentation. And this program really just tries to educate our local fishermen about proper ways to dispose of monofilament fishing line. A lot of monofilament fishing line ends up either tossed on the ground or maybe disposed of in a trash can where it eventually blows out and then gets into our local waters, which can impact local marine life and fish who may get tangled or ingest some of that fishing line. So we not only have a map of our designated fishing line recycling receptacles, we also have partner fishing line receptacles listed on this map here. So we encourage all of you to look at this map and know where these receptacles are. And also, if you have any locations that you think a receptacle could be needed, please let us know and we'd like to add it to this list. Next slide, Lauren. And now I'm going to talk about some of our projects that we are doing to really understand the best ways to reduce pollution. So one of them is a nitrogen load reduction assessment project. And this project is really to look at all the host of ways we can reduce nitrogen within our watershed, whether it be wastewater improvement, whether it be stormwater improvement, and just to get a cost benefit analysis of what should we do where, what are the costs of each technique, so that it can be used as a tool for our local governments and property owners. If they want to improve water quality on their site and they want to know, what should I do? What's going to have the most benefit? They can use our tool to find that information out. So this tool has not been completed yet, but we are hoping to complete it within the next year and have this information be available for resource managers and municipality staff and our partners to make sure that they have all the information in one place to improve water quality. And then the second project that we're doing is a nitrogen solute transport model project. And this project is a project we're working with the United States Geological Survey on. And we're looking at how groundwater moves through our watershed. As you can see in the map on the slide, the groundwater takes varying times to move from the surface down through the groundwater and then to the estuary waters. In the shaded colors, you'll see the red is the 0 to 2 year travel time for groundwater. So that's the area where groundwater moves the quickest to get to our surface waters. And so this model is going to help us understand what can we do on land to have the best impact for surface water quality. So if we, for example, upgrade septic systems in this area, how much of a benefit will that have to the surface waters and groundwater quality? And how much time will it take for that benefit to be actually seen? Because we want to make sure that we're presenting the correct information to people. We want to make sure that people are completely understanding that if we make a change here one day, the next day we're not going to see the benefit right away. It might take a decade, it might take 2 decades to see that benefit. And I think that this information is just going to help us a lot to understand what actions we should take where, and then how long will it take for us to see an actual benefit, and will guide how we're making changes in our watershed with our partners over time. Next slide, Lauren. And then of course, no program would not be complete without monitoring. So how are we actually gonna know if what we're doing has any benefit? So we've been working with Suffolk County, the US Geological Survey, and our partners at New York State DC and Stony Brook to monitor water quality for the past few decades. Suffolk County does surface and groundwater monitoring throughout the estuary. On your right, you'll see a map of all the locations that surface water and surface water quality is monitored throughout our estuary. And this information has been collected since 1977. So it's a really great resource to see trends over time, to see, are we improving things? Are things getting worse? Where should we be targeting some of these water quality projects? And it's a great way to see if our new projects are having any impact at all. And then USGS has 2 locations where they do continuous water quality monitoring. And these are stations that have been installed at Riverhead and at Orient Harbor since 2012. So that information is really helpful because it's a continuous stream of data that's collected. So we can see, you know, in the middle of the night, what was the dissolved oxygen, and how does that change over the course of the day, which is really helpful information for us if there is any sort of issue with water quality. And then lastly, harmful algal bloom monitoring has been conducted by our partners. And this information is really helpful to understand the health of our estuary waters as well. And all of this information is available on our website. If you click the link on this page, and I know Lauren's going to be handing out resources at the end of this presentation as well with all of these links that we've included, you can find out more about all of these monitoring programs. And I think that's my last slide. Okay, so I would like to thank all of you for listening into that section of the presentation. And now I'm going to introduce Lauren Shear, who is the Education and Outreach Coordinator of the Peconic Estuary Partnership. And Lauren is going to share with you the different ways you can get involved with the PEP and how you can help make a difference for the Peconic Estuary.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. And now that you've all had a nice taste of the different projects we do for climate change, water quality, and habitats and wildlife, now I'm going to dive into what you can do and how you can get involved with us. And as Sarah mentioned, I am going to give you something in the chat box, which is our digital pamphlet of all these resources that we've been talking about today and all the links, so you have it. Okay, so that's in the chat box right now. And I'm giving it to you now because I'm going to be referring a lot to what's in there. Because my next set of slides, I'm going to be giving a very general overview of the ways you can get involved with us, the opportunities that happen every year, and just what you can do as an individual in our community to be a steward for the environment. So the first thing we'd like to go into, and what PEP likes to have our citizens participate in, is citizen science programs on Long Island that are hosted by our partners. And PEP participates in 3 of them, which is the Alewife River Herring Survey that Elizabeth mentioned, the Horseshoe Crab Monitoring Survey, and the Diamondback Terrapin Monitoring Survey. And the reason why we encourage people to be part of citizen science is because you really help to build a database of data on all of these species. Not only when you're out there doing citizen science are you collecting information on the population status of these species, but you're also helping us to understand the habitats that these species use in their life cycle. which is really important because when we have this knowledge and with an army of citizen scientists out there gaining this data, it's helpful for scientists to then inform decisions when it comes to coastal planning and any conservation efforts we need to do to help ensure that these species can continue to thrive and that we can continue to live in balance with them. So citizen science programs are very instrumental in that. And I'll talk a little bit about each of them. The River Herring Survey, which is hosted by CTUC, and we collaborate with them and Long Island Sound Study to host training workshops so you would know what to look for. But basically, as Elizabeth was mentioning earlier, alewife do come to the estuary to reach freshwater streams, and including the Peconic River, to find a place to spawn. And we have a great citizen science following that helps us to identify where alewife and river herring are spotted in our ecosystem. And as you can attend a training workshop in the beginning of the year. Alewife season is between March and May. And so this is a citizen science survey that's conducted really on your own time. So once when you learn what to look for, you can go out with your family, your neighbors, on your own and look around at these freshwater streams to help document if you see any spottings of alewife into an online survey, which is housed by CTUC, and it's in that packet that I gave you. And as a result of that, you help us to see a map that starts to look like this. With your data inputs, we then start seeing where there's hot spots in a sense of where alewife like to go. And what that does is help us to identify alewife spawning grounds. And Elizabeth did mention this earlier. And we've already identified those two major alewife spawning runs in the Peconic. And as a result of that, because of your help, we now can see where we might need to do something for conservation. And there's those barriers, those dams that we know of in the Peconic River. And with the help of this knowledge, we then can push forward and across the finish line these fish passage projects to help these alewife populations to get as close upstream as possible to their ideal spawning habitats. So the more we know, the more we can help. For the horseshoe crab monitoring survey, this is a little bit different. It's hosted by Cornell Cooperative Extension and the New York State DEC. We participate as a site host at Hampton Bays and Squires Pond. And it's different from the alewife in that it's not conducted on your own time. It's actually a formally scheduled program. So you would go on any of the websites of the site coordinators that host certain sites across Long Island, and can go to a scheduled time and register as a volunteer to help those site coordinators to monitor for horseshoe crabs. And this is a little bit later than alewife. It's between May and June. And the PEP, we will post the times, and it's typically at night at high tide during those months. And it's a really fun program. These are some pictures of some volunteers that came to those scheduled times. And we're not only trying to learn about the numbers of horseshoe crabs that come into our ecosystem, but there's also a tagging process, which really gives you that hands-on experience, where you help to insert a button tag into these horseshoe crab shells. And as a result of that, that tag gets registered into the United States Fish and Wildlife database. And it's so fun because if you do this a few years in a row, 1 year you might tag a horseshoe crab, and then that next year you might actually recapture or refine that horseshoe crab and see the migratory pattern that it took. Maybe it just hopped over a beach, or maybe it went to Connecticut and back. So these are really helpful tools, and it's really helpful to get the more hands-on, the better, for us to get as much data as possible. Another citizen science program we encourage people to participate in is the Diamondback Terrapin monitoring survey, which is hosted by CTUC. It's on their website, again, in the packet I gave you. But we collaborate with them, and we actually hosted a training workshop earlier this year virtually, and it's a recording. So that's just a way of helping people to learn how to identify terrapins, what to look for. And this is even later than the horseshoe crab season, where it's late May into August, where we're looking to see where female terrapins are coming up to nest around the Peconics. That's an interest of our program. And a lot of that has to do with how are our shorelines being utilized by these species, so that we can be better equipped to inform and encourage living shorelines versus hardened shorelines, to keep that habitat open for species like terrapins that use the shorelines for nesting. And this is similar in the alewife survey, where you would participate on your own time after you may attend a workshop to learn what to look for. And then, you know, you could be walking on the beach and you might find a terrapin or evidence that they're there, and that's great data to input into this survey. And from just this past year, all of these data points, or most of them, popped up because of that workshop, and you're helping us to see these cluster points and these high traffic areas for those terrapins, which is helpful information. I'm just showing you a picture of what a terrapin looks like and the salt marsh habitat that they like to utilize. But again, with terrapins, it's not just spotting the species itself, but the evidence that they're there. And in that workshop, you'll learn about the tracks, the test nests, and the predated nests that you can also input as data, because it just is a symbol that they are utilizing that shoreline, which is just as good information. And I just want to mention that coming soon, we're going to be launching a wildlife monitoring network with our partners. The PEP thought it made a lot of sense to house all of these surveys into one place. So instead of you having to go to everyone's separate entities' websites to find these programs, we want a one-stop shop that lists all of these surveys, so you can learn about the different opportunities that are out there, and then it can funnel you back to those websites that host the surveys. So it's just a nice branding effort and a way for us to collect more data and for you to get involved with maybe more than one program that interests you. So that was the habitats and wildlife ways that you can get involved. And now I'm going to jump into the climate change aspect of things. And as Joyce was mentioning and Elizabeth was mentioning about living shorelines, if you do live on the water, you can make a decision to install a living shoreline versus a seawall. And if you want to make your property resilient. And that living shoreline, which all those benefits were mentioned earlier, keeps that habitat open for species, and also does a good job of keeping us intact from erosion, and helping with storm surge and flooding, and also with pollution runoff. So that habitat is really crucial. It would be such a shame if the Peconic Estuary all of a sudden turned into being lined with all of these seawalls. That just takes away from the character and the charm that our community has known for forever. So it's a nice way to choose, a nice thing to choose living shorelines in the face of climate change. And on a global scale, I'm sure we all know these other ways we can get involved as an individual to help reduce our carbon footprint. You can ride your bike, carpool, choose solar, just reduce the burning of fossil fuels is helping to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases going into our atmosphere. Planting trees is like a carbon sink, drawing out some carbon dioxide that is heavily being pumped into our atmosphere. So these are things that you can do in your day-to-day life to help reduce your carbon footprint. And now for water quality that Sarah was talking about, the ways that you can get involved, there's many ways. And this graphic I love to show because what we do on land truly does impact what goes on in the water. If you're on your property, you might be washing your car, your dog, you're walking your dog, maybe you don't pick up after it, or you're fertilizing and using pesticides. You may think the bays and the groundwater are so far away, but it all travels there. And you know, if these things are out of sight, out of mind, it's hard for people sometimes to grasp that we're so connected. And so when it rains and stormwater runoff carries these nutrients and pollutants, it does make its way to the bay. And when it seeps into our ground, it does make its way to the groundwater. And we start seeing elevated bacterial levels or harmful algal blooms as a result. And so there are things that we can do. And one of those things, you know, if we do a negative on land, we can also do a positive, is upgrading your cesspool or septic system to that innovative alternative system that treats nitrogen. Sarah talked a lot about the Suffolk County Septic Improvement Program. And we hosted a CAC meeting, our Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, on August 25th, which was a workshop on the ins and outs of this program. Suffolk County spoke. These 2 slides are from that workshop, and it was recorded. So if you missed it, you can go on the digital packet I gave you to find that link and learn how to apply, what's involved. And this is just a picture of the different systems that are available and on the market out there to choose to upgrade your system, which really can make a huge difference based on all the things that Sarah was saying earlier. And then there's the Homeowner Rewards Program that Sarah mentioned. If you install rain gardens, native plant gardens, or rain barrels, you have the opportunity to apply, if you live within the Peconic Estuary watershed, to be reimbursed up to $500 for doing these things, because we want to encourage the, taking away stormwater pollution. And these plants don't need fertilizers and pesticides to thrive. They're already adapted to living here. So just by doing this, you are contributing so much to helping keep our water quality healthy and to improve it as well. And I just want to point out, this is something new this year that we worked with Long Island Regional Planning Council, Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan, to create a reduced personal nitrogen pledge. And it's on the LIRPC's website under the LINAP tab as a way to encourage communities to reduce their nitrogen footprint. And it's a nice informative webpage of the 10 things you can do. And I have the checklist right here on the right-hand side. But if you do some or most or all of these things and you submit that, you can be recognized as a gold, silver, or bronze, get that recognition on the website itself, and then your town can be recognized as well. It's just a nice thing to do, and it's something that's informative, and you can encourage other people to take the pledge as well. And this is my last slide. There's so many things we can do every day to help our Peconic estuary. And I just put a little collage here of different things. If you're a boater, you could do Peconic friendly boating, meaning things like following the no discharge zone that we have in our estuary, not traveling your boat through eelgrass beds that are already vulnerable because your propeller can cut them up. And that link is also in that digital packet of all of the different ways you can be a Peconic friendly boater. Leave no trace when you're out on the beach, when you're hiking. It's so important not to leave garbage behind, and maybe even pick up garbage in a safe way and dispose of it, and to help reduce plastic pollution. And it's the law to clean up after your dog, and that one act every day can just reduce the amount of nitrogen and nutrients into our waterways. Reusing and upcycling, don't necessarily buy new material, but reuse old material, especially when the holidays come around and you're wrapping a bunch of gifts. The STOP program at the bottom left of the slide that Sarah mentioned is a great opportunity in your town to take your hazardous waste and dispose of it properly there. We don't want hazardous waste lying around. And the monofilament fishing line receptacles. You could save a life, literally, just by putting that plastic monofilament line into that receptacle, taking it away from not choking wildlife that it might have if you didn't remove it from the environment. And then the last 2 pictures I feel very strongly about with education. And starting at a young age, we can educate our children and instill that value and that just awe of nature. When you get them out there and you educate them about the environmental issues, but also the cool things about our ecosystems, it really gets them excited, and you start instilling that steward mindset at a very young age. So it's very important to educate. And then our Citizens Advisory Committee meetings, we host them quarterly. Those are really a great platform that we offer for everybody and anybody to come and voice their concerns about maybe environmental issues, or just to learn about the projects that are going on and how they can get involved. We really encourage people to join those meetings. And you don't have to formally join, you just show up when we advertise. It's a great way to get involved with us and our partners. So that's the presentation. I'm offering the website here on this slide and the email, peptalk@peconicestuary.org, if you have any follow-up questions. And of course, we're on social media where we constantly keep people updated with what's going on with the Peconics and what we're doing as a program. And our website's peconicestuary.org. So that digital pamphlet has every single link that we've talked about today and more. So really use that as a resource, share it. And at this time now, I know we went a little bit over. Thank you for those of you who hung on. We're going to open up to the Q&A portion at this time. So I see the chat box is very active right now. So I don't know if all questions have been answered, but if there's anything further, please ask that question now and we can answer it for you. It looks like we've got everything covered.
Yeah, we were trying to catch up, I think, as questions were coming in. So if we missed anything, please type it in the chat. And Lauren has again shared the resources packet, which does have a lot more information. And if you do have any more questions, please feel free to reach out via email. Because I know it was a little difficult, I think, to manage all the questions that came in. Oh, there is one question. How is CCMP addressing microplastics? So we are going to be working with the USGS a lot more. They have done a few pilot projects across Long Island to sample the amount of microplastics that have been entering our surface waters, and then using that information to develop maybe more targeted responses for reducing microplastics. Joyce, was there anything else you wanted to add that maybe I'm overlooking or didn't mention?
No, I just wanted to stress that, you know, microplastics is something that is relatively new in the past decade or so. So the new CCMP takes this into account, as Sarah said. For us, part of it is really getting data that we can make decisions based on, but certainly it will mean targeted education and perhaps model plans and codes that can be followed around the estuary.
Thank you for the feedback. I'm seeing people are appreciating the resource list, which is great. We definitely want, you know, all this information accessible to you. And I think doesn't look like there's any more questions. So I'm going to just share the last slide, which is just promoting the next two estuary programs presentations for today. Long Island Sound Study will be presenting at 12 and South Shore Estuary Reserve at 2. So where you find our registration link, their registration links are there as well. And feel free to attend them. So thank you so much for joining us, and this recorded video of the meeting will be available to you in a few days on our channels and our website, and we hope to see you all at a next meeting, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye everybody.